So the Bears get a win last night. What's that mean? It means it was fun for Chicago fans. Finally, right? You get a win. It was a fun 3 hours. Justin Fields lighting it up. DJ Moore going crazy. Like, this is good. Talking yourself into it a little bit, maybe. Felt like the NFL world had turned the page collectively on Justin Fields. But like, I don't see it. Not going to happen. I was kind of there. I don't know that all of a sudden I'm back in. But maybe you are. Maybe you're talking to your Bears buddies Friday before a great weekend in that city. You're like, if you could just cut down on the mistakes, it's pretty athletic. Might have something here. See Josh Allen's first 2 years? I saw a tweet about Justin Fields and his run the last week. Games with 4 or more passing touchdowns. 0 of those games, his first 30 games of his career. 2 of those games in the last 5 days. The only quarterback in the NFL to do it so far. Twice. Be honest. You're flirting with the idea. A little bit. So it's nice to get a win because it sucks losing every week. It was nice for your franchise quarterback, or the idea of your franchise quarterback, to look like something, or at least better than the first couple of weeks. But I'd ask Bears fans a really simple question. Is this what you really want? I don't know if it's an easy answer. Because we're talking about Caleb Williams. You're talking about being in the hunt for Caleb Williams. And he's that special. And you would turn the page. It doesn't matter who was a quarterback. You'd be like, okay, we're doing this. And that may seem kind of far away. It's the beginning of October. And just because you're bad, it doesn't guarantee you a chance. And Fields working out long term, maybe not being a top 10 quarterback, but working out for some version of whatever working it out is a safer plan than hoping you outmaneuver every other team that's going to try to lose games at the end of the year. Because I think it's going to get weird. Now, losing games, tanking in the NFL is completely different than the NBA. The NBA, we accept it. But I just don't believe that NFL guys are wired, or the sport is wired, to have a Sam Hinkie approach for an entire year. Half a season, maybe. Last month, yeah, it's probably going to get weird. Now, the Bears at least were in, and still continue to be in, I don't know if it's a race, but you get the point. Like, whoever those teams are, like, we kind of know. We think we know right now, but things are going to change. Some teams are going to stay healthy. Other teams aren't going to be healthy. But if we're looking at the bad teams, the Giants have the worst point differential in the NFL. And I know they pay Daniel Jones, but I don't think that would be much of a debate. Carolina's 0-4. Just took Bryce Young. I still think you do over Caleb Williams. Washington's competitive every week, except for that Bills game. Arizona's 1-3, but they're better. They're definitely way better. Like, at some point, it was like, no, he's definitely going to go to Arizona. But it's just hard to predict. Like, are you really going to be that bad that long? Denver, Vegas? But losing in the NFL is different, because even when you're watching at home, and it happens to me every single weekend, we know bad team versus good team, at least in our heads. And then all of a sudden, bad team's down 7 with the ball and 2.5 minutes to go. And you're like, how'd that happen? You're like, 2 fumbles went the other way and they jumped on it. And there you go. There's your parity in this league. So trying to position yourself every week to lose games to outflank everyone else for Caleb Williams is a really hard thing to pull off. So like I said, the safer thing would be, what if our guy develops? What if our guy develops instead of trying to get caught up in that race with everyone else? The NBA tanking is easier to pull off. You just sit guys all over the place if you want to. Like, guess what? Veteran, you have a back problem. Don't worry about it. You could play a guy point guard that shouldn't be playing point guard. And I think because it's happened for so long, although I do think it's improved from kind of the lows of years ago where it felt like so many teams were already starting the season for no reason whatsoever. We were just more accepting of it. Whenever I would talk to NFL guys, when I was at ESPN, former players, analysts, we'd have some former front office guys in, and you would just ask about, like, well, could you do this? Or, some of the Andrew Luck stuff, and they would just recoil and be like, no, you can't do that. There's also a health risk involved. Like, you can't be a player playing in an NFL game going like, I'm going to go have speed so we can get that quarterback next year when I'm not even going to be here. The sport is just wired entirely different. But the reason I kind of connect this to the Bears a little bit is that there was a bit of a freak out before the season started about what Caleb Williams might do, depending on who was projected to have the number 1 pick. His father, Carl Williams, did a couple quotes in this bigger feature on Caleb in GQ. And there's an awesome mesh tank in there, by the way. I'm trying to figure out a link to that. But it's this Caleb Williams love fest in the piece, which he deserves. Talks about the NIL, talks about his future. And the NIL part of it is convinced some people that maybe if he doesn't like who has the number one pick, that he can make enough money at SC with the rookie scale contracts. Yeah, maybe. But, do you really want to run around college for another year and risk injury? And even if he blew out both ACLs, he'd probably still go number one. He's that good. But Carl got some eyebrows raised when it came to Arizona because he said, quote, I've talked to Lincoln Riley, and Kyler, meaning Kyler Murray, struggled of where he was drafted. He also said Baker struggled because he went to Cleveland. There's this rumor that Caleb Williams only has a few teams that he wants to go to. I'm not sure how real that even is. Carl Williams also suggested, and the reason I even bring this up in context of the Bears part of it is that it's weird. Like, wait, would the Bears be a place you'd want to go? From the outside, I'd think, well, of course, great history, amazing city. Why not? I mean, some guys don't want to play. They'd rather play indoors if they can. But it seems weird to think the Bears actually have a little bit more questions as an organization, whether it's ownership, whether it's some of the more recent history. But like what? Because they didn't develop Trubisky and Fields. That means that Caleb Williams shouldn't want to go there. There feels like there's a lot more places that would be worse off than Chicago. But if they're going to be really weird about this, and maybe weird is the wrong word, but if Carl and Caleb Williams are like, no, we're actually like only into going to a few places. I don't know if that means that it's a trade. I don't know if we have an Eli Manning thing all over again. But then it led to a bigger conversation in this piece and something that I've heard talked about in the past, and I think I've kind of rejected. But Carl Williams said this, quote, the funky thing about the NFL draft process is he'd almost be better off not being drafted first. The system is completely backwards. Now, whenever I've heard that in the past, I've just gone like, what are you going to do? Just have everybody be free agents? And the counter is, yes, do exactly that. It's like, well, wait a minute. The best teams are going to get the best players. It's like, well, don't you think you should be rewarded if you're that special to be the number one pick? Don't you think your skills, your standing should be rewarded, that you get some kind of benefit out of it instead of going someplace that you don't want to go to? And I thought, well, that actually feels like it might make sense. Now, there's plenty of stuff that I can't predict that would happen. I mean, if you were going to do a basketball version of this conversation, okay, the number one pick, well, there's no draft anymore. It's all free agency. Well, does that mean the Lakers would just get everybody? Well, I guess they would get everybody until they didn't have enough cap space to get everybody moving forward. So teams would make mistakes just like they do in free agency, just like they do in the draft. But it still feels like it would remove the hope part of what exists for the franchises that aren't doing well, whether that's the NBA or the NFL. So I still feel like I like the draft, but I wonder sometimes if I'm being selfish about it. There's another point to be made here, and it's about athletes in general and trades and the transactional part of this, where Drew Holiday, who was traded, technically to Portland and then Boston in the Lillard deal, his wife, Lauren Holiday, shared what she called a vulnerable post on Instagram because she wanted to be vulnerable. And she talked about basically how much it sucked. And I think all of us could totally understand it. She said the family was really upset. We're talking about kids that were growing up with other kids of Bucks players, removing themselves from the community. He took a nap, Drew took a nap, woke up, found out he was traded. There was no heads up. I don't know how to solve the no heads up thing. I just don't think it's super realistic for a front office to be telling every player like every single move. Like, think about the deals that get close and then don't get done. Like, would you want that as a player? Hey, I think we might trade you in 30 minutes. Just want to be sure we're being professional about this. And then it's like, we didn't trade you, but have fun tonight. Enjoy tonight's game. So I don't know if that's really realistic, even though that idea sucks. Imagine if you woke up from a nap, your wife comes in and was like, hey, we're moving across the country. She said, we were crushed. She also said, quote, imagine if we didn't put dollar signs on athletes. Imagine if we invested in them as humans, as incredible forces of good. Look, it does suck. Imagine if you were being, let's put it this way. Let's go back to the draft thought. Imagine if you were graduating college, you're sitting around at senior week, you're with your buddies, and, one of you guys is a lawyer, or I guess you have to go to law school for that. You understand the point. You're an engineering student. All right, let's do that. Let's do something without like mandatory graduate school. You're pretty good at it, and you're from Chicago, and you're like, I love the Midwest. I love the city. I never want to leave. I want to marry a girl from Chicago. easy going. Or you're from Southern California. You're like, I can't imagine ever not having this lifestyle. You're from the Northeast and you never want to leave. And yet you're waiting out to kind of figure out where your 20s into your 30s are going to play. And be like, oh, it looks like I have to work in Atlanta. Oh, this is interesting. I have to go to Seattle. And then 5 years after that, you're like, I don't really like Texas, but I live in Fort Worth. So, because that's where I work. Well, right. We all understand that. We all understand, like, yeah, this is, oh my gosh, you really explained it in a way I've never thought about before. But it would suck, right? It would. And I know it's different, but what if we allow ourselves to think that maybe it isn't different? You're trying to map out the rest of your life, and it's in the hands of the profession of a league. You know, granted, there's partners and there's all these different things, but it's in the hands of some, like, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. It's only the city that takes you, and then what they do with you moving forward. That's where you're going to live. That's where your kids are going to go to school. That's where you're going to make your friends. And look, it's a good deal. All right. As soon as you start talking about the money, nobody's going to have any sympathy for it. And I understand that. And it's always made me wonder, like, if there actually is another way to do it. Dominic Foxworth and I have talked about this in the past, where he's like very anti the draft. Like, shouldn't Caleb Williams be special enough that he can say, I don't want to live in this city. I don't want to work for this company, essentially a team. You've shown that you can't get it done. You're a bad company. So why do I have to go there? None of us would ever have to do that. The trade part of it, like, I think, yeah, it can seem really insensitive, but I mean, you want to do this? You want to have no trades in the NBA, and then you can have no trade demands? Would that solve the stars, the player empowerment era that we're in right now? Be like, okay, cool, no trades, but you can't demand one then because there are no trades. That wouldn't be a lot of fun for us. Probably kind of boring. The top of the food chain for NBA players would probably be like, yeah, we don't want that because we want to push things around. And let's face it, the stars kind of control a lot of the CBA stuff that happens. Maybe the rest of the players would be like, that's cool, I'm down, but we're not good enough to ever demand trades. So maybe it wouldn't really work. So whenever I'm like presented with, I don't know that it's a moral dilemma, but you try to put yourself in the place of the person that's like, yeah, but this part of my job, as great as it is, the money, the accolades, that I'm this special, this part absolutely sucks. Be like, yeah, I think you can have sympathy for something, as I do in these cases, and the sympathy's kind of met with, okay, yeah, you're right, it sucks, but it's not going to change. Like, how bad do you really want me to feel? Oh, that's a shitty situation. Yeah. And I think most of you are probably in the same group. I feel like that's kind of like, I'm in the group that would agree that these things suck, shrug, and say, keep it moving. There's also some of you listening like, hey, you want to pay me $30 million, you could trade me to Russia. Because whenever it comes to the money that these guys are going to make, there's only going to be like, there's going to be a maximum level of sympathy, and it's not going to go all that high. But the problem with all of that is that essentially what you're saying is what you want for everyone else, you would never want for yourself.